This drawing didn't go as I planned it to. It was meant to be for my daily 5 to 10 minute drawing exercises series. But 5 minutes in, I'd drawn so much less than I had thought I'd have drawn by then that I realized it wasn't going to go the way I thought. So instead, I focused on how much of this can I draw in 10 minutes? Can I draw a credible amount of this scene in a style that kind of looks okay? Although obviously it's going to be very loose. Paris rooftops are a wonderful subject, but they are very cluttered, and the things such as perspective angles and alignment are still very important. So there's actually still a lot of precision that we still need, even in a loose, casual, gestural drawing style. Let me show you how much at double time I get done in the 10 minutes. And then I'll finish the rest of it in faster time than that. And then I'll also do something at the end that I hadn't also planned to do at the start. So certainly this drawing and this video certainly turned out differently to how I expected at the start. However, this is a great subject, so if you've particularly never tried to draw a rooftop scene, why not get this reference photo from my channel community page and give it a go. Remember, it's going to be slowest and most difficult at the start, where we have to establish the proportions and also, in this case, the perspective angles. Once we've established them, it's much quicker to move out from that part into other parts. We have a lot more to reference as we go, and we also become more familiar with looking at our subject, which particularly matters in a scene such as this, where we get more used to spotting and understanding what the shapes are and how they connect with each other. But we also have to align rows of buildings that obviously follow a street somewhere down below, unseen at ground level. We have all of these windows. Now, I've simplified the windows by basically making them all a dark background, even though in reality that's not always the case. I simply didn't have time to worry about different sorts of effects. And speaking of effects, this subject and this drawing is an excellent example of drawing the effect of detail, not the actual detail. Although in lots of ways I'm representing a lot of the detail, the architectural detail, it's still impossible to draw it all. So we're wanting to have line work that creates the effect of the clutter and not the actual accurate representation of the clutter. So I'm continuing to move out from my starting point. I'm still in my original 10 minutes at this point, but I don't feel like I've done much of the drawing at all. Now, the architectural detailing is stronger in this central part, so that also will slow me down a bit as well as I work out how am I going to keep everything in alignment. Alignment is really important, but particularly when we're drawing this fast, we're not going to get our alignment as precise as we'd like, so we also have to work out how to make slight adjustments when things don't align up, when we have a bit of a gap with no architecture in our reference photo to put there. Or we have architectural detail in our reference photo, but we don't have a gap on our paper between things. Although starting from the center and working out is a way of preventing that from happening. So I'm just trying to extend how much I've done so I can get a better sense of the proportions and then just go up and go down, which in some ways I think is the easiest way to go rather than trying to spiral out, where I find it's easier to lose the sense of proportion. So I've pretty much now gone the whole width of my reference photo, and I'll add in a bit of hatching for the darker shadows on the sides of the chimneys. And you can see, particularly with the perspective angles, it's the angles of these chimneys, these long chimneys, and also the the pressed metal lines on the ceiling where the perspective angles need to slope in an aligned way. So this is my 10 minutes up. I'm now into extra time. So that's how much I got done in 10 minutes. And I was hoping to substantially do it in 5 minutes and finish somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes. So I certainly misjudged this. It's been a while, I guess, since I've drawn Paris rooftops, although it was a fairly popular subject for me early on when I first started drawing after my trip to Paris, particularly when I was drawing more with pencil. On my next trip to Paris, I hope to find a location where I can do some of this in real life. So, in some ways, it becomes a bit more difficult when we move away from the facades of the buildings and just start to have odd, awkward angles and the back views of the windows, because there's less kind of structure that's obvious to see. And so we actually have to have more careful observation because we don't have a row of windows. We don't have these easy to identify details. And so we do have to work out angles a lot. I draw a lot by looking at shape here. I talk a lot about looking at form when we draw these days, but sometimes it's actually more helpful to go for shape, particularly a subject such as this, and to look at particularly triangles and to see now when I draw this corner of the chimney or this wall moving back at a steep angle that forms a triangular shape, does my triangle look like the triangle in the reference? And sometimes negative space is a better way of doing that. We draw the space that the wall creates on the non-wall side because that's an easier shape to get a sense of the proportions and to therefore use for an accurate line angle. So I feel like my pace certainly has picked up now as I move downwards somewhat with my drawing. It is certainly a fairly gestural drawing. I'm not worried too much about value except for those dark shadows on the chimneys, because I feel they're quite helpful in creating some visual separation just as we move around the massive detail. It helps to almost frame certain elements so that we can take in smaller parts at once and therefore understand them more easily, what we're actually looking at. So there's more chimneys, more chimney pots, more of this, it's an aluminium alloy, I think, roofing panels where the seams that are used to strengthen it really stand out and become visually a high impacting part of what we see. And they all weather to this wonderful grey colour. So now I'm seeing some fronts of buildings again, and so I have a bit more detail to do on the other side of the street, behind the initial street that I began drawing. And you can see now these perspective angles coming down, following the lines along the chimneys, the chimney pots in a sense. And then in between the stronger perspective angles created by the chimneys, we have the corresponding ones of the roofing panels that need to, as approximately as we can, fan between the two angles. Although it's important to note that some of the roofing panels angle down at a different degree, angle down at a steeper angle, and therefore they don't line into the same perspective pattern. So I've pretty much reached the top here now, so there's not a great deal to do. And the more we move into the corners, the more gestural we can become. This second section took me 15 minutes to draw, and I probably drew 65 to 70% of the actual area of the drawing in just half as much time again. So it certainly became quicker. And so then I started thinking, well, what do I want to do? Do I want to try and represent the grey roofing? Because the roofing colouring is such an important part of the visual effect. So while I quite liked the drawing, I decided to have a go with my sketch markers, and I spent another 4 minutes now putting just some grey values over the top. And I decided just to use 3. I was going to use a light grey for the more weathered tops, and then a darker grey, my N4. So I used a Copic sketch marker N1 for the tops, N4 for these darker front panels of some of the roofs, not all of them. And then I used an N6 for those very dark shadows that were on some of the chimneys. And then I did a few more details using the N6 just so it sort of spread the darkness and it didn't look quite so stark. So what do you think of my Paris rooftops? Not quite the 5 to 10 minute gestural drawing, I thought. Do you prefer it without the values, without the tone? I'll show you both of them side by side in a moment. I'd love to know in the comments which you preferred, with or without the values. I really haven't worked out myself which one I think. And here they are. Although the line work on the left is a little bit darker just from the photographing and printing. But why not have a go yourself? G'day, I'm Stephen Travers. Look, I just love Paris and I loved revisiting the rooftop, such a favourite subject of mine. I hope you get the photo from my community page and have a go drawing it. But look, whatever you draw, however you draw it, whether it's in 5, 10, 25 minutes, make sure you have fun. I'll see you next time. Bye.